Hi, I'm Yulia, and this is the News Brief. Today we're going to be talking about how May Day, or May 1st, became a very significant event for Ukraine and all of the progress that happened in this one day. And then we're going to discuss it together in the comments so you don't have to suffer through this information alone, and I don't have to suffer alone. And then please leave your comments, questions, suggestions, anything in your mind in the comments down below so I can read it and we can communicate. Let's go. So today marks a historic day that the United States and Ukraine signed a minerals deal. And this one, I'm going to tell you, is really not that bad. If you remember, we've talked about this minerals deal time and again because every single time the conditions were less like a financial agreement and more like a slavery agreement. And it was less about Ukraine's benefit and Ukraine's reconstruction fund and more about Trump lining America's pockets at the expense of Ukraine and many future generations of Ukrainians having to pay it back, which is what Zelensky said, and said that he would never sign a deal like that. So today, a deal that's much better has been signed, and now the creation of the Ukraine Reconstruction Fund is to begin. But that's not the only thing that happened today. There were so many monumental events that might not seem huge, but that are finally progress that are taking place in relation of the end of the war in Ukraine, rebuilding Ukraine, and Ukraine's future membership in the EU as well. I am going to read you a quote from this mineral signing just to before we move on to the next thing, let me actually read you a quote from today's signing just to give you a perspective on what actually was signed and how it relates to Ukraine and how it benefits us. Thanks to President Trump's tireless efforts to secure a lasting peace, I'm glad to announce the signing of today's historic economic partnership agreement between the United States and Ukraine, establishing the United States-Ukraine Reconstruction Investment Fund. As the president has said, the United States is committed to helping facilitate the end of this cruel and senseless war. This agreement signals clearly to Russia that the Trump administration is committed to a peace process centered on free, sovereign, and prosperous Ukraine over the long term. President Trump envisioned this partnership between the American people and the Ukrainian people to show both sides' commitment to lasting peace and prosperity in Ukraine. And to be clear, no state or person who financed or supplied the Russian war machine will be allowed to benefit from the reconstruction of Ukraine. It was stated very clearly that this is not a Ukraine is indebted to the United States, is a vassal state, or the United States has any control over Ukraine agreement. It is purely a financial agreement. And interestingly, Trump does like money, obviously. So while it took him 3 months of his masterful negotiation skills and Russia still came out with the same demands, today, after the signing of this deal, things have started moving a little bit differently. Now, Russia is suddenly open to talking about the American presence at Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which they were absolutely not open to just a couple of days ago. Just a couple of days ago, in fact, they still wanted to denazify Ukraine, take down Zelensky, also no American presence at Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, absolutely no accession of Ukraine to NATO ever, potentially no EU accession, demilitarization of Ukraine, and so on and so forth. Also, of course, the recognition of temporarily occupied Ukrainian territories as Russian on the international stage, which, again, will never happen. So now that Trump is happy that Ukraine is paying back its dues, I also have a problem with that statement, but let's just make it that for now. He is suddenly also willing to sell Ukraine weapons, apparently, and that is not confirmed yet, but the US is preparing a sale of weapons to Ukraine for the first time since the Trump administration took office. Let me remind you that Trump was saying he doesn't want to do charity and send Ukraine weapons, so Zelensky offered him $500 billion to buy Patriot air defense systems, and Trump said no. So it wasn't really about money, it was about pressure. And at that point, you could interpret that pressure as Trump potentially aiding Putin. But at this point, I feel like it was pressure because Trump just wanted Ukraine's rare earth minerals. But we will never know. I mean, obviously, the man changes his mind every single day and says things that do not coordinate or match each other every 5 minutes. Anyways, we have the deal signed, and there is apparently a weapons sale in the works. The next step for Ukraine in the subsoil agreements is ratification. So the Ukrainian parliament has to ratify the agreement in order for the agreement to actually come into fruition. There were many conditions to this agreement where neither side can pull out, and before there is any sort of desire to pull out, both sides have to agree, and it has to be ratified by the Ukrainian Verkhovna Rada, which is Ukraine's parliament. So this is what's going to be happening next. And here is the statement from the Ukrainian authorities. This is a financial agreement. American partners will invest in companies that extract minerals in volumes and locations determined by the Ukrainian government, and they will receive financial benefits. We will be very happy if the American people, while helping us defend ourselves, can also earn money. And Ukrainians will receive defense and investments in reconstruction. This is the most mutually beneficial option. Which, to be fair, it is, because the previous ones really were just about America benefiting and Ukraine getting almost nothing out of our own rare earth minerals. So as I said, today is a day of a lot of progress. And one of these things is Lindsey Graham said that he does have the support of 72 senators for a bill that would introduce new devastating financial sanctions on Russia. And also tariffs on countries that want to buy its oil, gas, and other key products, if Putin refuses to enter serious negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. I mean, to be fair, it doesn't matter if he's going to refuse to enter negotiations or not. I think the devastating new sanctions on Russia should be imposed regardless. So Russia is not able to conduct war further. Now, of course, every single time a statement like that comes out, Vladimir Putin comes to the world stage and announces a truce for a day or two. And conveniently, this time, the truce is for May 9th. You know who that truce serves anything to? Russia, because May 9th is their May Day parade, Victory Day. Because, I don't know if you knew this, but Russia considers itself the sole winner of World War II and thinks that literally we all owe it. They also do not talk about World War II in terms of 1938. They talk about the beginning of World War II as 1941, which is actually the day where Kyiv was bombed at 5 in the morning. That's the start of World War II for Russia. And it ended, of course, when Russia won it. So yeah, May Day, May 9th, is their victory parade, and that's when they want to have the temporary ceasefire again. This ceasefire doesn't benefit Ukraine. This ceasefire doesn't benefit anyone. It benefits Russia because obviously that way they can avoid Ukrainian drones showing up unannounced and uninvited and crashing their little May Day party. What it also does is it makes Putin seem like he's willing to negotiate, and he's coming forth again with ceasefire proposals. But again, it's Putin, and he's doing it for himself. And all of these 72 senators should really consider putting those sanctions on Russia, regardless of whether they're negotiating or not, because they consistently keep making it look like they're negotiating. And now, ready to discuss the American presence at Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is also part of that veil and of that front of willing to negotiate. But in reality, they're not going to be backing down on any of their other ridiculous conditions. Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, for them, out of all of the conditions that they put forth, is the smallest one. So yeah, this is kind of the, frustrating part about all of the countries imposing sanctions on Russia, is that they always have a condition of if they don't negotiate, and then Russia can pretend to want to negotiate. And then these conditions suddenly go poof. And Putin continues being able to conduct warfare in Ukraine because no new sanctions are being introduced. So what I want to say to the world is, please take your rose-colored glasses off and just do it. Like Nike, just do it. So another point, which actually Andriy Sybiha introduced, is that if Russia wants ceasefire, and it wants ceasefire now, and it's ready for a ceasefire, why do it for 3 days? Why not do it unconditionally and indefinitely? Because again, it's all a show, it's all a facade, it's all a force. And that is in response to the US State Department saying that we will see what Putin does during that 3-day ceasefire, and then we will make our conclusions, and then we will see what we should do. Dude, you have seen what he has done multiple times. He violates every single ceasefire and then pretends like he didn't. But this one, he's probably not going to violate simply because, Well, actually, I mean, I take that back. It's May Day. They do need to show their grip on Ukraine and how well they're doing for, their little celebration of, what was that? Victory over Nazism. Yeah, that statement rings so well when you're torturing Ukrainian people and Ukrainian journalists and, trying to quite literally destroy and erase a neighboring country. But anywho, so yeah, as I said, we are going to do something about Russia always comes with conditions, and Russia always pretends like it abides by these conditions. And I think the last thing that I want to mention today, which is not part of the big progress in Ukraine, but actually a very big mourning point, I did just mention that Russia, celebrates on May 9th the victory over Nazism, yet it conducts a lot of very Nazi-like behaviors. And one of those behaviors is torturing Ukrainian journalists. And I do want to do a bit of an in memoriam for a fantastic Ukrainian journalist whose body was actually returned to Ukraine a couple of days ago. And it showed signs of Russian torture, and some of her organs were gone. And to be fair, she was mutilated so much that in Russian morgue, she was marked as an unidentified male. Victoria Roshchina was a Ukrainian journalist who was actually trying to prove and show all of the crimes against humanity and against POWs that Russians have been doing. She was an investigative journalist, and she was investigating the conditions in which Ukrainian POWs and just regular people are being held in these Russian detention centers. The body also showed evidence of an autopsy conducted in Russia. She had a broken rib, she had abrasions, hemorrhages in various parts of her body, possible signs of electric shock. There were signs of torture on her neck. She was missing her eyeballs and brain. And also she was shaved. She was also missing part of her trachea. And the reason why they did that, why they removed those organs, is because if you were to strangle someone, your trachea would show signs of asphyxiation, bleeding into your eyes and things like that. So anyways, these organs were taken. An international pathologist suggested that these removals have been an attempt by Russia to conceal evidence that Roshchina died from strangulation and from other various bits and pieces of torture. And she is a journalist. Under international humanitarian law, journalists are civilians. And first of all, you can't take them as prisoners of war. Second of all, the torture that has been done to her is seen as the same torture that would be done to a civilian. And this is just ironic in the worst way possible. A woman who dedicated her career to investigating Russia's war crimes against civilians and against everyone has died in a Russian detention center from those crimes being done to her. She was 27 years old, and she was a brilliant, beautiful woman who has been doing a lot for Ukraine and a lot for the effort of showing who Russia really is in this war. The OSCE representative on freedom of the media, Jean Bretou, has condemned Russia's ill treatment and murder of Ukrainian journalist Victoria Roshchina. I would not call it ill treatment. I would call it a war crime. Bretou said he was shocked by the facts revealed by an investigation by a coalition of 45 international journalists led by the NGO Forbidden Stories into the torture and ill treatment of Ukrainian journalist Victoria Roshchina, who died while being illegally detained without formal charges in Russia. The systematic torture, ill treatment, and other violations of international humanitarian law by Russia demand a strong international response, he added. And the thing is, all of these things demand a strong international response. Sanctions on Putin, and Putin consistently trying to pretend like he's willing to negotiate, but it's just a facade. Those deserve a strong international response. North Korea, quite literally joining Russia's war against Ukraine, deserves a strong international response. Russians trying to trick and kidnap African nationals into the war in Ukraine deserves a strong international response, and all of the war crimes do too. And I hope that we live to see all of the people responsible tried in The Hague. That's all I have for you for today, and if you enjoyed this brief and you would like to see more like it, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel, turn on all of your notifications, send the video to a friend, and like it. And of course, if you have something to say, comment it down below, and I will be happy to read it. See you next time.